The Mishnah in Masechta Sukkot Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis says, "Kol Shivas Hayomim," all 7 days of Sukkot. Adam oises ukosoi keva uveisoi arai. A person is a koiveya. He makes his sukkah into his permanent residence and his home into a temporary residence. Then it says, "Yordu gishamim me'emisai mutar lifonois." It starts raining. So at what point is one allowed to leave the sukkah? Mishe tisrach hamikvah. A mikvah, some kind of a stew of beans, which it's before in the Gemara. It ruins very easily from rain. So as soon as the rain reaches the level of tisrach hamikvah, one is allowed to leave the sukkah. Moshlu moshul amad of they compared this situation when one has to leave a sukkah because of the rain to a eved shebo limzoi kois leraboi. The eved brings a kois to his master. V'shofach loy kitoin al ponov. Instead of receiving his service, he drops an entire bucket on him. In other words, that the rain on sukkahs is a bad sign. It's a sign, like the Gemara says. The Gemara brings a brayse, "I efshi b'shimushcha." I'm not interested in your service. And it's important to note that I think it's the Chassam Sofer that says that this is only in Eretz Yisrael, because in Chutz La'aretz, which is when it's a season of rain, it's not a siman klola. But in any case, this is what the Mishnah says. Now, the Mishnah begins with Kol Shivas Hayomim, so it would clearly seem that this statement, that if it rains, it's a bad sign, is about all the 7 days of Sukkot. However, the Rambam in the Pirush HaMishnayos writes, "V'yiridas hagishomim betchilas haSukkos," that if it rains in the beginning of Sukkot, remes ki Hashem einoi mekabel ma'aseim berotzen. It's a remes that Hashem is not mekabel our mitzvahs berotzen. But the Rambam says betchilas haSukkos. What does he mean about tchilas haSukkos? So, actually, in the context of this year, which is the time of Hakel, the Gemara says in Soita Daf Mem Aleph, we have the pasuk that tells us when Hakel takes place. The pasuk says in Parashas Vayelech, "Miketz sheva shorim b'moyed shnas hashmita b'chag haSukkos b'voy kol Yisrael leirois es pnei Hashem Elokecha." So the Gemara says that if it would say just b'moyed, I would think it's b'reish shata, the beginning of the year. So it says b'chag haSukkos. But if it would say b'chag haSukkos, I would think afilu yom tov achrin. I would think that even Shmini Atzeres is a time for Hakel. And therefore, Kosav Rachmana B'voy Kol Yisrael, as they come to be Oila Regel, which is Me'aschalta de Moed. And therefore we do Hakel Moitzoy Yom Tov Harishon. So you see that even Shmini Atzeres, which we actually refer to as Shmini Atzeres, but it also carries the name Chag HaSukkos. And therefore, if it would just say Chag HaSukkos, we would say that Hakel could take place on Achron Shel Chag, on Shmini Atzeres. So you can say that the Rambam is telling us that Yeridas Hagshomim Betchilas HaSukkos means not on Shmini Atzeres. But that l'chara can't be, because why would the Rambam have to emphasize that? It's obvious, because there's no shimush of sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. So it must be that it's talking about the 7 days and not about the 8th day when we don't sit in the sukkah. So what does the Rambam want to say by tchilas haSukkos? Obviously, he's saying that only the first night, because the only cutoff point that we have during Sukkot between the beginning and the hemshich of Sukkot is the first night. Because the first night we have a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah, whereas the rest of Sukkot we could not eat at all. And then we nachilas keva, and then we don't have to sit in the sukkah. And the Rambam, it would seem, is saying that the siman klola of efshi b'shimushcha is only on the first night when there's a choiva to eat in the sukkah, a kezayis or a kebetza, as we learn, tesvov michag ha matzos. But the rest of sukkahs, when we say I boye ochil, I boye loy ochil, teishvu ka'in taduru, just like at home you could eat, you could not eat, so also in the sukkah you could eat, you could not eat, then it's not a siman klola. That's what it would seem from the Rambam, in spite of the fact that the pashtus of the Mishnah is not so, because the Mishnah says, Kol shivas hayomim odem oises ukosei keva ubeisei yare, yordu geshomim meimis aimuta lifones, and the Mishnah goes on to say, Moshul Moshul ma'adav adoyme. It would clearly seem that it's talking about all 7 days, but the Rambam that says B'tchilas HaSukkos obviously holds that it's only on the first night. Now, the rationale behind this is clear, because the first night, I mean, let's say the rest of Sukkos, when one does not have to eat in the Sukkah, so the chiyuv of eating in the Sukkah or being in the Sukkah during the 7 days of Sukkos is teishvu, basukkas teishvu, and Chazal say teishvu ke'ein taduru, that you sit in the Sukkah just like you are dor at home. So just like when you're door at home, if it starts raining into your house, you would leave. So also in the sukkah, when it starts raining into the sukkah, you can leave. Which means that when it's raining, there's no mitzvah sukkah, because the mitzvah is taduru, and it's not tadurable when it's raining. So there's no mitzvah. There's no mitzvah, so it's not a siman klola, because you're not mechuyev and you can't deliver. You're not mechuyev b'chlal. Whereas the first night, the mitzvah, according to many Rishonim, is even if it is raining. In other words, even if it's mitzvah, you're mechuyev. It's just that you can't deliver the chiyuv. You can't be mekayim the chiyuv, because the tnoei hakiyum require that it should be done in a way of taduru. So you have a chiyuv that you can't be mekayim. And that's the Rebbeinu Shalom creating a situation where you have a chiyuv and you can't be mekayim it, and that is the siman klola. That's what it would seem is the idea behind the Rambam's statement that it's only b'tchilas HaSukkos that is considered a siman klola. You know, the Rosh in Brachos, Perik Shloisha Shachlu, holds that as I said, that there's no chiyuv, there's no ptur mitzvah, and on the first night you are mechuyev to eat even when it's raining. So lefizeh, in other words, he's saying that the chiyuv that we learn from Tesvav Michag HaMatzos, not only it's not based on Teishvu Kein Toduru, but there's also no requirement to have circumstances of Kein Toduru to carry out this chiyuv. The chiyuv could be carried out even in a fashion of mitzvah, and one is mechuyev to eat in the sukkah even when it's raining, and he's mekayim the mitzvah even when it's raining. That's the Shitas HaRosh. So, according to the Rosh, you have to say, I mean, it would seem that Adrabah, the first night, it's not a siman klola. Why am I saying that? Because how's the Rebbeinu Shalom saying, if you're mechuyev to do it, and you do it, so you deliver the service. So the Rebbeinu Shalom created a difficulty, but difficulties enhance the mitzvahs. They don't diminish the value of the mitzvahs. L'fum tzara agra. So the Rebbeinu Shalom, by creating circumstances of difficulty, is not saying efshi b'shi mushcha. He's adrabah. He's giving us an opportunity to overcome difficulties and be mekayim the mitzvah. So according to the Rosh L'chorah, that on the first night you're mechuyev to eat and you're mekayim the mitzvah. When it's raining, you can't say that the first night it's a siman klola. You have to say that it's a siman klola only during the rest of Sukkos. Actually, it's mefurish in the Rosh, as you'll see later, that it's a siman klola the entire Sukkos. I'm saying according to the Rosh L'chorah, the first night it's b'chlal not a siman klola, only the rest of Sukkos. But according to the Rambam, it would seem that punt fakert, that when is it a siman klola? It's a siman klola when the mitzvah is removed, which is on the first night, that by the Rebbeinu Shalom creating circumstances of mitzvah, he's removing from us the mitzvah. Okay, but the Shitas HaRambam is very shver, because l'chayre it's a mafurish mishnah that it's a siman klola even on the first day, beyond the first night. And once it's a siman klola on the first day, obviously it's a siman klola on the second day and the third day, because there's no difference between the first day and the second day. The only cutoff point is the first night. And why do I say there's a mafurish mishnah? Because the Mishnah in the beginning of Masechtas Tainis says, "Me'emasai maskirin gevureis geshamim." From when do we say Mashiv Aruach U'Mered HaGeshem? Rebbe Lezer Omer miyom tziv harishon shel Chag. Rebbe Lezer says that from the first day of Sukkot you say Mashiv Aruach U'Mered HaGeshem. Rebbe Shua Omer miyom tziv ha'achron shel Chag. So only from Shmini Atzeres, which is what we do. So Amalei Rebbe Shua le Rebbe Lezer. Rebbe Shua said to Rebbe Lezer, "V'haloi en geshamim b'Chag ela simen klola. Lama hu maskir." Why do you, Rebbe Lezer, say that we mention geshamim Mashiv Aruach U'Mered HaGeshem from the first day of Yom Tov? It's the Chasimin Klola. Why should one be maskir? Rebbe Lezer responds, "Afani lo yamarti lish oil elo lahaskir." I didn't say that we should ask for rain. Asking for rain in the same Talamot Avada we don't do until later. I'm just saying about mentioning the Rebbeinu Shalom's Gvuras Geshamim, and that's okay even during the time that it's a Siman Klola. Now, when do we begin to mention Mashiv Aruach U'Mered HaGeshem according to Rebbe Lezer? In the morning. Just like we mentioned it in the morning of Shmini Atzeres, according to Rebbe Lezer, you mentioned in the morning of the first day of Sukkot, but not at night. So if, according to the Rambam, that it's a Siman Klola only if it rains on the first night, so what is Rabbi Shua saying to Rebbe Lezer? V'aloi ein shamim b'chag elo Siman Klola lama hu maskir. He's only saying that you're maskir from the first day. The first night you're not maskir. And the first day, it's no longer a siman klola. So l'chari, it's clear from this Mishnah that it's a siman klola beyond the first night. So many years ago, I asked the shayla to Betzalel Zolti, who was the Rav of Yerushalayim. Yeah, this was on Chalamoid Sukkos Tafshin Mem. It's kind of 50, how many years ago is that? It's 42 years ago. Okay, anyway, so he said that, the Yerushalmi in the beginning of Tainis asks about Lididan. According to us, that we mention it on Shmini Atzeres. The Yerushalmi asks, Shmini Atzeres, V'yazkim mi ba'erev. Why don't we begin to mention Mashiv Aruach U'Mered HaGeshem on the evening of Shmini Atzeres? And the Yerushalmi says, Les kol amet hamon. Since not everybody's in shul at night, and I guess they weren't making hakafos yet in those years. So not everybody's in shul, and they only come in the morning, and therefore we want to start at a time when everybody will know that we started saying Mashiv Aruach U'Mered HaGeshem. But what was the question of the Yerushalmi that you should mention from at night? Maybe the time to begin is in the morning. So he said, you see, that the Yom of the Azkara, like any other Yom in Halacha, begins from the night. And therefore, the Yerushalmi is asking, why do we start in the morning? Why don't we start at night? I mean, anything that's totally in a day, we begin from the night before. So therefore, he wanted to say that even if B'Poyel, we only would begin saying Mashiv Aruach U'Mered HaGeshem on the first morning of Sukkot, but Avada, in principle, it would be shaykh already to the first night, because there's no such a thing as a day that begins in middle. It begins in the morning. And therefore, Rabbi Yeshua is saying to Rebbe Lezer, how can you say that the first day of Sukkot is the day of being maskir gvuras geshamim? The day begins at night, and even if you're going to postpone the mentioning of Mashiv Aruach U'Mered HaGeshem until the morning, that won't that will not answer this issue. That I'm saying to you that it can't be that the proper day for mentioning Mashiv Aruach U'Mered HaGeshem is the first day of Sukkot, because a day begins with a night, and the night is a siman klola. Okay, that's what he said. It's like a very lamdish teretz, but the truth is that the Rosh, when he brings the kasha of the Yerushalmi, the way the Rosh didn't learn the Yerushalmi so lamdish. The Rosh says that the Yerushalmi asked about the last day, and he says the kivin da avru yemei hachag, the ein hagshamim siman klola. Ra'ui hoyo sheyaschel miyad ba'erev. So the Rosh says that the Yerushalmi is asking that we should mention already at night of Shmini Atzeres. Why is the Yerushalmi asking that? Because it's no longer a Siman Klola. So you might as well already be masked from at night. And to that the Yerushalmi says, less kol ametamon. So you see that the Yerushalmi didn't have an issue with splitting the night from the day. And the Yerushalmi only asked it because there's no reason not to do it at night. So Mamela, l'chara, what he's saying, it doesn't suffice. So the question comes back. Oy bazoi, what is Rabbi Yeshua saying to Rabbi Lezer? Aloy enk shamim b'chag ela simen klola lama hu maskir. We're maskir from the morning, and only at night is it a simen klola. So what's the problem? So the emes is that this discussion already appears in the Ritva in the beginning of Tainus. In the Ritva in the beginning of Tainus, he says like this: Amalei Rabbi Yeshua aloy enk shamim b'chag simen brocha lama hu maskir. So his girsa in the Mishnah in Tainus wasn't that it's a simen klola. His girsa was hoyel ve'ein hagshamim simen bracha b'chag lama hu maskir. Pirish kedayama b'sukkah lama geshamim yord lama geshamim doimim b'chag la'evet shemoza kois la'rabbi v'shofach le'kitin al panav. And therefore, it's not a simen bracha. Now he says, umikan mashma demishum kol hachag ke'omar v'loy alaylo harishin bulvad k'dekosav rabbeinu Ephraim zal hosam. So he doesn't quote the Rambam and the Pirush Mishnayos, but he does quote a Rabbeinu Ephraim who said that it's a simen klola only on the first night. And he says, Mikan mashma, that the Mishnah in Masechtes Tainus shows not like the Rabbeinu Ephraim. The Rabbeinu Ephraim said that only the first night it's a simen klola, but Rabbi Yeshua says to Rabbi Lezer, and he's talking about the morning. So obviously in the morning it's still a simen klola. So the Ritva says that it is based on his girsa that in Tainus it says v'haloi ein shamim b'chag simen brocha. So the Ritva says there are two levels. It could be the Rabbeinu Ephraim is right that it's only a simen klola the first night, but the entire yontiv it's not a simen brocha, and therefore the Mishnah in Tainus uses the language v'haloi ein shamim b'chag simen brocha, and it's not a simen brocha the entire yontiv. So, and Mamela, it answers the question. Now, the Rambam is taka also goris in the Pirush Mishnayos and Tainus v'haloi ein hagshamim b'chag simen brocha. So we could say that this answers the Shittas Rambam also, that the Rambam holds that this that he wrote in Masechtes Sukkah, that it's a simen klola only on the first night, that's a simen klola, but it's not a simen bracha the entire Sukkos. However, if you look in the Pirush Mishnayos and Tainus, he says, Kvar kodam lecho b'soif ha'perek hasheni misukah ki yeridas hagshamim b'sukkos einei simen bracha. So the Rambam obviously did not differentiate between these two madregas of einei simen bracha and simen klola, because the Rambam clearly quotes in Tainus the Mishnah in Sukkah, and he says, we already said in Masechtes Sukkah that the gshamim b'chag are not a simen bracha. So to the Rambam, not a simen bracha and a simen klola mean the same thing. And Mamela, according to the Rambam, the question comes back, what is Rabbi Yeshua saying to Rabbi Lezer, v'alo ein gshamim b'chag ela simen klola lama hu maskir, or halo ein gshamim b'chag simen bracha lama hu maskir? The issue of lav simen bracha or simen klola is only the first night, and we're talking about the morning now. Yeah, so my father once wanted to say that l'chora, where did the Rambam, this that the Rambam holds that only the first night is a simen klola, is the Chavada based, as we said, on the fact that only the first night is a chiyuv, and the rest of Sukkos you could eat, you cannot eat. It's just about taduru, and therefore it's not a simen klola. Now, but this is all according to us that paskin, like the Chachamim of the Mishnah Masechtes Sukkah Daf Chav Zayin, that there's only a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah the first night, that we learn tesvav, exer shava, michag hamatzos. However, Rebbe Lezer in the Mishnah says that yud dalit sudas chayiv adam lechel b'chag b'sukkah, that you have to eat 14 sudas in the sukkah. He says, Teishvu came to the he says, just like at home, a person eats 2 sudas a day, so also on sukkahs, he's mechuyev to eat 2 sudas in the sukkah every day. Mamela, it comes out that according to Rebbe Lezer, there's a chiyuv every day, just like we hold there's a chiyuv the first night. So Mamela, Rabbi Shua over here in Masechtas Tainis is talking to Rabbi Lezer, who said that you mentioned Yeshamim the first day, and he says to him, "V'aloi ein shamim b'chag elo simin klol olamu umaske." He's talking to Rabbi Lezer, l'shitosoi shel Rabbi Lezer. That Rabbi Lezer, you hold that it's a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah, all of sukkahs, and according to you, it's a simin klol of the whole sukkahs. This that the Rambam writes in Masechtas Sukkah that it's a simin klol only on the first night is l'didan de kaimelon kechachamim, that there's only a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah the first night. So then I found that Rogatshov in the Tzafnas Paneach says this in one line. He says that Rak B'tchilas HaSukkos Havi Simin Ra Kosvaram Pirshim Mishnayos, and he says Zeh Rak L'Rebbe Lezer L'Shitosei the Svirle the Chol Zayin Choyv. So he says in one line, he says that this is what it is. Now, but to my great surprise, I found that all this says in the Meiri in the beginning of Tainus. You would never expect to find this in the Meiri. The Meiri says like this: Rabbi Shua miyontiv va'achrin sheme'achar she'eino nuroitzim bohem b'chag, since we don't want rain during yontiv ein roi laskiram. V'hu amoroi me'achar shakshomim b'chag simin klol she'harayonu chayovim lechol b'sukkah v'ageshem moineinu b'kach v'afal pishem elaylo rishoyna v'elech rishos. Even though from the first night and on it's only a rishus, mikol mokan ein derech bnei adam lahav yishaitam b'mini targima. People want to eat a sudas keva. V'chein shechiyuv shina miyakol zayin v'ef shel zayin b'loy shina. And now he says v'af ledask tzaz go'oinim shepirshu sheloi nemer aleim simin klola elo lailo rishoyno mikol mokom einam simin brocha. That's like the Ritvose. Umitoich kach heim gorsim b'divrei Rabbi Shua hoil v'akshomim b'chag einom simen brocha. Now he says mikol mokim, you don't need to say that. Af l'divreim efshel afarsho l'Rebbe Lezer atzmoi she'omar sukkah of zayin yudalet sudas adam chayiv lechel b'sukkah koloi mar hoil v'ledidcha miyah simen klol laheim lomahu maskir. So he says that Rabbi Shua is talking to Rabbi Lezer l'shitosei shel Rabbi Lezer, that you, Rabbi Lezer, hold that there's a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah yud dalet sudas is oy bazoi, is according to you, it's a siman klol of the whole yomtiv, and therefore lama hu maski. Okay, we know, like the Rambam says, that all mishpatei HaTorah are eitzos mirochik, migdoi la eitza v'rava aliliyah, to bring us to tikkun hadayis v'yishur hamaisim. So, avada, we need to be misboinen in the meaning of the fact that a mitzvah is poter min sukkah. You know, b'chlal, we say that mitzvahs lav lehonois nitnu. As Rashi says in Rosh Hashanah daf Chav Ches, it's l'oil al tzavarehem nitnu. And we say in the Masechtas Bava Metzia that when one has a choice of doing a mitzvah that he wants to do and doing a mitzvah that he doesn't want to do, he should rather do the mitzvah that he doesn't want to do, because lokuf es yitzroi odif. So there's a maila in doing a mitzvah when it requires kfir, and lefum tzara agra. So what's the point that in sukkah in particular, we have this halacha that the kiyum is dafke when it's comfortable. And if it's not comfortable, there's no mitzvah. What does that mean? We also find in the mitzvah of sukkah two extreme opposites. On one hand, you know, the Bach says that even according to the Mandama, mitzvahs ain't sheiches kavana. In sukkah, you have to have kavana because you have to have the kavana of laman yedu doresechem ki b'sukkah say shafti as b'nei Yisrael. It requires more kavana than the standard mitzvah. On the other hand, sukkah is the only mitzvah that you mekayim in your sleep, where you have no das at all. You have no kavanah. True, you go to sleep willingly, but during the sleep, you mekayim a mitzvah, and you don't even know what you're doing. So it's a kiyum mitoich siluk hadas. On one hand, there's a requirement of laman yedu, and that you should be conscious of the chiyuv of laman yedu, and you should focus on the laman yedu. On the other hand, you have a kiyum even in your sleep. So you know it's Yadua, the kasha of the Tur in Siman Tov Reish Chav Hei, that we should have been celebrating Sukkos in Nisan, because immediately after we left Mitzrayim we had Sukkos Mamish or Anani HaKovet, And so why was Sukkos moved to Tishrei? So in the Sefer Kapos Tmorim, the Maharam Chaviv brings in the name of the Livnas HaSapir, which is a Sefer Kadman that's brought already in the Reishis Chochmah, that he writes, Sheba'avoin ha'egel, nistalku anani ha'kovid, v'chozru b'schus Aaron v'chulei, v'hoisach hazarosan achrei shenitztavu b'mishkan v'nizdarzu bo, u'Moshe Rabbeinu olav ha'sholem yorad lemochros Yom HaKippurim, v'tziva al ha'mishkan, Moshe Amru Razal, v'nitvas ha'mishkan huv'o ba'boiker, which is the 12th and 13th day of Tishrei. Im kein biyud daled b'tishrei ha'aviru kol b'machane al yasu oid lemelechus ha'kodesh v'lachein b'yom tesvav shekvar sholmu ha'maitzim chazru anani ha'kovid v'lachein mitzvah sukkah b'tesvav Tishrei. It's fascinating that the Goyen says exactly the same thing. It's before some of the ganze Welt in the name of the Goyen, but it predates the Goyen a few hundred years. It's an interesting thing. Now, but Mamish the same cheshbon with baboike. So he's saying that we are celebrating the return of the Anani HaKovid after the Chet HaEgel, and that actually took place on the 15th day of Tishrei. And that's why we make Sukkos on the 15th day of Tishrei. Now, after the Chet HaEgel, it says, Vayoyim ehini anochi koires bris, neged kol amcho esen niflois, asher loy nivru b'chol ha'oretz u'b'chol ha'goyim. V'roa kol ha'om asher ato b'kir bo yasmase Hashem ki noirahu, asher ani oisei imach. So the Rebbeinu Shalom is promising that he's being koires bris and he's going to do niflois. Rashi says that these niflois, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's response to Moshe Rabbeinu's request, which appears some psukim earlier, where he asks for v'neflinu ani v'amcho mikol ha'om asher al pnei ha'adama, which means we should be set apart, we should be separated, we should be different. And the neged kol amcho es and neflois is the response to the request of v'neflinu ani v'amcho. But the Ramban asks that he wonders, what are these neflois? He says, we don't find behemshich to this promise anything extraordinary that happened now. What are these neflois? Es and neflois. So in the Aderes Eliyahu from the Goyen, right there, he says that what's the neflois? Shrias ha'onon al hamishkan, v'hakovoid hashoira aleihem le'ein koil, v'hoylech lefneihem le'ein koil, which is the Anani HaKovid. K'moshe kosov ki ayin ba'ayin nire ato, Goimer va'anoncho aleihem, ad shetomhu kol ha'umois, va'amru mizois oila min ha'midbar kesimrois oshon, va'af sheholach ha'onon lefneihem bi'yitziyoso mimitzrayim, loy hoya l'shaitoi, ela l'shaitoi adayam, v'gam loy hoya la'enei kol Yisrael rak lefnei hanavim shebehem. It wasn't something that was visible. So the Goyen says that what are the neflois? The neflois of the Anani HaKovid. Okay. Now, with regards to these neflois, it says in the Pasuk, in Kapitel Lamed Daled, Pasuk Chav Zayin and Parash Kisisa, Ki al pi hadvarim ha'ele, korati itcha bris ve'es Yisrael. What's HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying? I made a bris with you and with the Jewish people. The Ibn Ezra says, Itcha and Yisrael, that's Keneged, V'niflinu ani va'amcha. So this is V'niflinu ani va'amcha, al pi advar ma'ela karati itcha bris v'es Yisrael. So what is this pasuk talking about? Ki al pi advar ma'ela karati itcha bris v'es Yisrael. So the Gemara in Gittin says, Lo koras HaKadosh Baruch Hu bris im Yisrael, elo al ha'torah sheba'al peh. Shenemar ki al pi hadvarim ha'ela. Al pi hadvarim ha'ela karati bris. Now, Torah Sheba'al Peh in general is the Yud Gimel Midas Sha'Torah Nidreshes Behem, which we know from early sources parallel the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. And therefore, this bris that was nichras for Torah Sheba'al Peh, al pi hadvarim ha'ela karati bris, is shaykh to the bris shloish esrei, as we really see that it was only in the process in the process of the Matan Luchei Shnias that the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim were Nizgala to Moshe Rabbeinu as he was about to ascend Har Sinai to receive the Luchei Shnias. Now you know that in the Seder HaTfilah of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, Chazal say Yasu Lefonai Kaseder Hazeh, and many Kadmonim say that it doesn't say Yoimru, it says Yasu Lefonai Kaseder Hazeh, that really in order to activate the Midas Harachamim, we have to be Yasu Lefonai Kaseder Hazeh. In other words, we have to be Mikayim the Hidovek b'midoisov, Mahu Rachum Afato Heyei Rachum Mahu Chanun Afato Heyei Chanun. And as it can be explained about all the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim Kumavur B'Kamaduchti. Now, as far as this mitzvah of Hidovkus b'midoisov, the Rambam says in Hilchos Deis Perek Aleph Halacha Zayin, V'keitzad yargil odom atzmoi b'deos elu ache yikavu boy. How should a person be margil himself in these midas until it becomes part of who he is? Yikavu boy. Yase v'yishne v'yishalish b'maisim she'oise al pi adeis hoim tzoyos. He should do what one does when he really feels like doing these kind of things. V'yachzer behem tomit. He should keep on repeating it. Ad sheyu ma'aseyem kalim olav v'lo yeh bohem torach. Which means that the mechayev of af ato heyei, in order to make mekayim that, it's not enough to force yourself. Forcing yourself is a maila in mitzvahs, but in the mahu af ato, we really need to reach a point where ma'aseyem kalim olav v'lo yeh bohem torach, because it's about reshaping my personality. It's about making myself into a chanun, making myself into a rachum, and therefore you need yaseh v'yishne v'yishalesh until it becomes ma'aseyem kalim olav v'lo yeh bohem torach. And we find the same thing really in the Yud Gimel Midas shehaTorah nidreshes b'hem, which is the klolos ha'inyan of Torah Shebal Peh, that the enjoyment is part of the mitzvah, as the Eglei Tal says in his Akdama. And he says that Talmud Torah is an exception to the rule of mitzvahs lav lehanis nitnu. As Rabbeinu Avraham and Ahar says also in his commentary on the Dorim Daf Lamed Aleph. So even though in all mitzvahs we say lokuf es yitzroi odif, but in Limud HaTorah we say lo olam yilmoid odam b'makom sheli boy chafetz. And Memela, we can understand that the Sukkos, which are about the Anani Akovis, which are Bechlal the Niflois Asher Loi Nivru Bechol Ha'oretz Ubechol HaGoyim, which are part of the bris, which was Nichras Al Pi Hadvorim Ha'ela, the bris of Torah Shebal Peh. So here we're not talking about a La'oil Al Tzavareim, but Dafke, we're talking about an Eine Mitzvah. It has to be something that's comfortable and enjoyable, and therefore the sukkah really has two ends. On one end, avada, it has to be l'man yedu d'reseichem, but you have to bring yourself to a point where it becomes natural. Becomes natural, in other words, that even in your sleep you're in the sukkah, because just like in the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, and in the Yud Gimel Midas HaTorah Nidreshes Behem, it's all about naturally flowing with the Midas Harachamim and making the Midas HaTorah Nidreshes Behem part of who I am, and Memela not learning b'makom she'ein li b'y chafetz, but dafke in the makom sheli b'y chafetz, connecting internally to the Yud Gimel Midas HaTorah Nidreshes Behem and to the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. So also the mitzvah of Sukkah, which represents this bris, these neflois, asher lo nivru b'chol ha'oretz u'b'chol ha'goyim, we're expected to be dafka, a non-mitzvah. And that's the way we're mekayim the mitzvah of Sukkah. So the Eibush Zalfim, we should really enjoy the Sukkah and everything that it represents and connect properly. And I wish you all freilich and yontiv, moyadim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim l'sosim,